All right, I'm really excited to welcome, we've got Don Hoover with us, owner of Binkley Hurst, 39 years of experience. Would you please make welcome Mr. Don Hoover?
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much. Well, now that he's established that I'm probably the oldest guy that's going to be up here this afternoon, coupled with the fact that this is the toughest time slot of the day because y'all are going to be wanting to sleep, we'll see what the good Lord has for us. And one of the things that I'm most excited about today is the fact that we go to a lot of seminars and we find all kinds of stuff online that talks about us working in our business. Good stuff. Talks about working on our business. Also cool stuff. What I'm excited to do today is to explore a little bit what it might look like for us to partner with God in what He is desiring to do through our business. And so, just a little bit of background on my journey. I've been at the same company for 23 years. And somebody comes to me and says, would you have any desire at all to own this company? And I said, I have no idea. What does that mean? Well, let's talk about it. We did. That was October of 2005. They said, we'd like to have this thing done by the end of the year. We did, but it was the following year. And I went to Lancaster, sat there, and signed my name 127 times. Went from being a sheep to being their shepherd. Completely changed my life. So since August of 2006, I've had the privilege of serving as a primary leader at Binkley Hurst. One of the things that I have set my sights on, so Matt Neff, we have a Matt Eshelman, Matt Neff would not stand up here and acknowledge that he even knows me, but I happen to have a really, really warm spot in my heart for that dear man and for his family. So when we purchased the company in 2005, I said one of the things that we need to do is we need to see this thing operate in a fashion that's going to honor and glorify Christ. So I would go to Sight and Sound. I've known Glenn for 50 years. And I would go to Sight and Sound, sit there and watch these awesome pictures be put on, even way back before Enoch. See these awesome pictures be put on display on the stage. And I'm saying, if God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, what in the world does that look like today? What does it look like to honor Christ with the same radical obedience, the same capacity to hear His voice? What does that look like today? And so we began a journey with Keith Yoder, I might add, and Don Riker and other coaches here locally, and it's just been truly an amazing, amazing journey. So with that, let me just say quickly that our mission at Binkley Hurst is equipping for growth. I used to have a mission statement that was a paragraph. I couldn't recite it if you tried to force me to. But now, sitting in my basement one afternoon for probably 3 or 4 hours, writing and throwing pieces of paper into the fireplace one after another, I finally centered on equipping for growth. Those of you who don't know, our company is active in the farm equipment business, so we would be happy to sell you a piece of equipment that might enable you to grow something, or we'd also be very intentional as we evolved and developed in having our own seminars and our own times of enrichment. We call our gatherings customer enrichment or employee enrichment when we get together, because it's really about raising the bar and helping to help them understand what it means to honor Christ in such a way. Our vision is to serve our Creator, our community, and our clients with integrity and diligence. And again, it's not super long, not super profound, but it's something that we just try to live. And that's what we're going to see with a lot of this stuff. It's just simple. It's my sharing with you what I have seen God do. Because some of this stuff is so ridiculously beyond what I could do, there's just no other way than for me to believe that truly God has been doing what only He can do. And it's after we have committed to, let's use this business in a way that's going to bring glory and honor to Christ. So what motivates me to do that? 2 Corinthians 2:14 is a scripture that I use. I mean, it's on my heart. It's in my brain. I've said I don't have a tattoo, but if I did, it would be right here. It would be, there has to be a difference in the way I steward a business or steward the days and weeks and whatever God's going to continue to give me. At 66 or whatever I am, every day's a gift. I'm attending funerals of people today, many of them, unfortunately, who are younger than I am. So God, I wake up in the morning, did an interview with somebody recently, and they said, Don, how are you going to get through this issue and that obstacle and this problem? And I said, well, I wake up most mornings, look down at my size 12 and say, okay, God, which way do I point these suckers today? And how big is the next step? And that's pretty much the way I'm living my life at this point. 2 Corinthians 2:14, we know that God is always leading us in victory and triumph. There's a sermon series in itself. And through us, he diffuses the fragrance of the knowledge of himself in all places. I've told our team many, many times, Jesus is not going to come walking in here and take his seat, take his place on the platform when he's given the opportunity. He is here. He is modeled. He is gone. He's here by his Spirit. He's entrusted the ministry to the millions to us. So through us, he is constantly diffusing the fragrance of the knowledge of himself in all places. What does that look like? Again, I'm going to have to really discipline myself just to pick out a few of the stories, things that we have seen God do, things that just continue to amaze me, myself, every time I think about them. And yet, there's no other way than to just point to what God is doing. And I know that others could certainly come up here and do the same thing, which is awesome. That's another thing. We need to be celebrating that stuff more. Okay? We need to be celebrating that stuff. I'll start with this story. Back in 2020, March of 2020, a gentleman called me one morning and he was really bent out of shape, very upset. And I said, well, your problem is, we've known each other for a lot of years. I said, your problem is you're not thankful enough for what you have. And he said, the only thing I'm thankful for this morning is that I haven't put a gun in my mouth yet. And I said, okay. Where's your wife? He said, she's right here. She heard me saying that. She said, yeah, I know where he's at. I said, okay. And I said his name. I said, you put me on speakerphone so that you can both hear what I'm saying, and you shut up and listen to me. I said, if you're going to talk stupid like that to me, I'll talk stupid right back to you. You shut up and listen to me. And I guided him through a contemplation and prayed with him. And I said, now, you get a piece of paper, and before you move your anatomy from that chair, you write down 5 things that you're thankful for. Well, Don, I don't know if I can do that. I'm just not in a place. I said, okay, let me help you. When you woke up this morning, you opened your eyes. Did you thank God that you could see? No. When you got up and you went over to the bathroom and the plumbing worked, both yours and that in the house, were you thankful? Some of you, when you get past 50, you'll understand what I just said. He said, no. I said, when you went out there and started what's left of that Ford pickup truck, and it actually started when you turned the key, did you thank God for that? No. I said, would you have, I didn't say complained, I got to be honest with you, but we're being filmed, so I won't say what I said. Would you have complained about that if it wouldn't have started, or if you couldn't have seen, or if you would have had an issue in the bathroom? Yeah, I see where you're going. I said, so you write down 5 things you're thankful for, and at noontime today when you come in for lunch, I want you to write 5 more. Tonight before you go to bed, you write 5 more. Before you put your head on the pillow tonight, you need to write 15 things you're thankful for. That guy started that exercise. About the 3rd day, he showed me a screenshot of his phone, and the second thing that he was thankful for that day was our conversation. That guy, he texted me this morning and said, we need to be praying for. He joins us in our online phone prayer times. He is in a totally different place today. Now, again, this is to God be all the glory. Those of you in the room who know my heart, this is not about me. It's about responsibility. It's about seizing on the opportunities that God gives us and having them smell like kingdom of God when we separate. I was on the phone, doesn't matter, a bunch of years ago, and a gentleman says, Don, I have a problem. My son is hopelessly hooked on heroin. And I said, why are you calling me? He said, well, I just thought maybe you could help. I thought maybe you could give him a job. You have a good company. I thought maybe you could give him a job. And I said, well, wait a second. You just told me that he's stealing batteries out of your combines and tractors. I kind of like my tools and batteries and stuff where they are in our shop. I'm not going to take a project like that on. And furthermore, you said he is hopelessly hooked on heroin. I said, you just declared death right over him. Really? So it started with Dad, And he got to a place of understanding the power of his word. Someone talked earlier this morning about the creative nature of our God. We are his representation here. Shortening that story a whole lot, I got to tell you this little piece yet. He said, we've tried 3 other programs. He's in a program up there somewhere in Pennsylvania right now. This guy was from 3 hours south of here. He said he's in a program somewhere up there in Pennsylvania, and yeah, we don't know. We just don't know. I said, well, where in Pennsylvania? It's a big place. Is it, Hazleton? Is it Pittsburgh? Is it Erie? He said, I don't know. Here's his phone number. He gave me the phone number, and I called this gentleman, and we talked a little bit, and I said, where are you? He was in Ephrata, 12 minutes from my chair where I was sitting in my office. Went over there the next day, picked him up, rode him around for 2 hours, talked to him, listened to him. And again, don't get in my truck if you don't want to hear about the only answer for your situation. Because I can BS you like everybody else can, or I can tell you the truth and give you the opportunity to respond to the love of Christ and to his redemptive redirection. That's a big deal for us. Redemptive redirection. Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. That gentleman, I began to build a relationship with him. More importantly, he began to build one with Jesus. He was water baptized in a creek out there back of Lidditz, and then we employed him. And he worked for us, I don't remember, 5 months, 7 months, something like that, went back home, and just God completely turned him around. Again, I'm not going to take you through all the gory detail, but it was an amazing, amazing thing. To the extent that his dad, the next time he came up to see me, standing outside my office, tears just running down his cheeks. He said, I'm here to thank you for what you did. I said, I did nothing except what I think Jesus would have done. God is so awesome in his redemptive quality. So we know that God is always leading us in victory. A lot of this is under, what am I pointing at? Whoa, slow down, back up. There we go. So a lot of this stuff is homemade. I mean, this is something I didn't get off the internet. This is just homemade and handy stuff that I have developed over the years. So when I think about profit, certainly there's a tremendous presentation we had here this morning. But I'm looking at the non-financial, non-directly financial. It certainly impacts finances ultimately. But remembering the bottom line, remembering the Lord your God, for it is he who gives thee the ability to get wealth. He gives us the ability to get wealth through our business conduct. But it's just an underlying posture of, without him, I can do nothing. And so I'm not going to obviously read that to you, but that's the kind of stuff that we use. So when somebody calls me and says, hey, Don, did you hear about Jackie? And I said, no, I knew she's not doing real well. She's 24. She has a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old children. And she was in very, very bad shape physically, cancer. Yeah, she's not doing well at all. She's pretty much on her deathbed. So I said, all right, it's about probably 9:30 in the morning. I just closed everything up on my desk, jumped in my pickup, and drove to 4 hours north. Went in there, prayed with her, took a little Holstein calf, because they live on a dairy farm, and anointed that thing with oil. Drove up there, prayed with her, served her communion. The next day, and she was in bad shape. I mean, just bad shape. Tubes everywhere and whatever. The next day, her dad called me crying, and he was in Virginia delivering a load of hay. And he said, Don, I don't know what in the world happened yesterday, but the swelling in her legs and feet are gone. It never did return. A couple days later, she was back out in the pickup truck, going around looking at the deer and just bouncing around the fields and what have you. And she was on her way to recovery. That went on for about 10 weeks. And then she made a quick turnaround, and in 10 days she was gone. How do you explain the love of God, his sovereign, awesome power in us? To a 4-year-old, he says, yeah, but where's my mommy? They asked me to come and speak at that funeral. And again, this isn't a Reader's Digest. I was there. When I got to the church where this was going on, I walked through there and just declared and released the presence of God in that church. I don't even know what the denomination was. It didn't matter. But I felt the compunction to implore the Lord to minister there. It was probably the saddest funeral that I'd ever been at, just in terms of a lot of things. When I stood up to speak, I can't say that I heard a rushing mighty wind, but there was something different. And the weeping stopped, little kids crying, the father crying, others crying. And the number of people that came back afterwards and said, what in the world happened? It was like the air changed when you stood up there. I said, it's the presence of God. It's the Spirit of God doing what only the Spirit of God can do. We talked about peace, the Spirit of peace, God's peace that passes all understanding. That's what I prayed with the family. I still have a relationship with that, with the widower. Calls me probably twice a week, called me this week and said, hey, I need some scrapple. We've got relationship. Still can't explain why. If you ask anything in my name where 2 or 3 agree is touching anything, anything. I don't know why, but we do acknowledge that God is sovereign. And so it comes down to what's really, where are we going to put our investment of time? The investment of money is incredibly important. The investment of our time is also equally important because it doesn't cost anything directly to invite a Chinese student. My wife and I host Chinese students, and our daughter and son-in-law have hosted some. And so about 4 years ago already, I guess, 3 or 4 years ago, one of the parents came over here from China to visit his son. Well, actually, the husband and wife came to visit their son. And he said, I want to talk to you sometime. He said that through his son, who's the interpreter. My dad wants to talk to you. I said, okay, what's up? Well, he operates businesses in Dallas-Fort Worth, and also he's got several in Shanghai and other cities. Seemed like a pretty aggressive, kind of like a Paul B. Zimmerman type deal. And he said, I'm really, really concerned because I'm always so afraid. I don't know what to do. I hardly sleep at night, and I worry, and I'm afraid. And he said, I want to know how you do business. And I said, me too. No, I didn't. I said, we've had our times. And I told them about how we crawled on our bellies through 2014, 15, and 16 through the valley of the shadow of near financial death in our company. And God in his mercy has restored us to where the last 3 years have been good. This past 2 years have been extremely good for us financially. But anyway, so this student brings his dad, and his dad says, I need to learn. I talked to him about prayer. And he said, well, I need to learn to pray. I said, yep, you sure do. But I said, just like I wouldn't meet you at Park City Mall and start walking up to you and just start talking to you because I don't know you. I would need to have some introduction, some form of relationship, something. And he said, okay, so let's talk about that. And we did. I went through probably a dozen sheets of paper, drawing pictures, trying my best to communicate. Well, who decides what's evil? Well, so you start drawing pictures. Well, what grace? What is that? I had no concept whatsoever of grace. The short story, God in his mercy, in about 2.5 hours, that man is pushing his hand across the desk with tears running down his cheeks, and he said, I need to pray to receive this Jesus. His wife, not so much. His wife said, I'm working on it. I just don't want to offend Buddha. I've been following Buddha for 30 years, and I don't want to offend the Buddha. And I said, well, hold on a second. Buddha, what is Buddha? Buddha's a stone somewhere. Buddha's a this or a that. I said, Jesus is the living, breathing. And she said, yeah, I understand, but I'm just not quite ready yet. So one day, I called Glenn Eshelman, and I said, Glenn, I've got a situation, and I described it to him. I said, I believe that if this woman could see the paintings that Glenn Eshelman has done, I believe she would respond to the invitation to salvation. They graciously invited us to come down there. We walked around through down there, and she, within, 10 days, 2 weeks, she accepted Christ. Why did they treat him like that? Because he had to be the propitiation for our sins and explain all that. There have been others. Again, just connecting. That's one of the things I love about something like this. I think I ought to be talking to that guy. I was just talking to Sean back here a little bit ago about something that we have going on now internationally involved in the kingdom. And it's awesome the way God continues to connect. What he's doing is he is building the church that he promised to build. I very, very seldom, and there's way brighter minds in the room than mine, but I very seldom these days use the term Christian. I very seldom talk about the church. I have a gentleman up in northern Pennsylvania who I talk to at least once, sometimes twice or even more a week. Older than I am even, imagine that. And I called up there one Sunday evening, he didn't answer. It's unusual, and normally he would call back in 15 or 20 minutes. He didn't this time. So the next morning, maybe 6:30 or so, I called again, and a very young lady answered his phone. I thought, wait a minute. She said, hold on, I'll let Graham tell you the story. Oh boy. She came on the phone and she said, well, Don, you know, my grandkids really like strawberry ice cream. And my friend knew that, and so he went and bought a box of strawberry ice cream, stopped in at the house on his way home to his house, and as he stopped, the phone rang, and so the lady at the house grabbed the phone. He sat down on a chair, his head went back over the chair, and she said, Don, I have run with the ambulance. I walked over to him. He made one guttural noise in his throat. She said, the man was dead. And it just went through me because I had talked to him several times about the Lord Jesus, but he had never made a commitment. So she got the kids quickly, and grandkids rather, and they dragged him off of that chair and got him on the floor, and she got up on his chest and started doing the compressions, and in his mercy, God had him flap his arm and start to breathe. I went up there the next Saturday. Well, I sent somebody else over there to love on him in the hospital. They put a stent in, and by Wednesday he was home. I went up there that Saturday, walked into the shop, and he and his probably 50-ish-year-old son were there. And I said, guys, you know something? I could very well have come up here today to a funeral. Yeah, I know. I said, God gave you another opportunity. Yeah, we really caught a break. I said, you did not catch a break, and it wasn't luck. God, in his mercy, gave you an opportunity. The next day, we got interrupted. Other people came, and I wasn't able to finish the conversation there. The next morning, I'm sitting up in my cabin. He comes driving in the driveway, parked out in front of the camp, walked up, comes over to the picnic table on the deck, and I said, good morning. He said, good morning. I said, I'm not here to preach at you, but I want to tell you, and he interrupted me and said, I just drove 45 minutes hoping you would. And he sat there beside me and prayed to receive Christ that day. 2 weeks later, his son, same deal. Both of them had very negative and for years, carried things against the church, against something that they saw, something they experienced in the church. So we've got to be so very careful to represent Christ well. I was in the parking lot over at our church one Saturday and just working on some stuff there. And I looked down, and I don't know, probably 600 feet away is a monstrosity of a black dog running back and forth in front of the church building. And wow, that's a big old beast. I had never seen anything quite like it. About that time, it cuts loose and comes running up across the parking lot within 50 feet of me and kept on running that way. So, I don't know, never saw that thing before. Here comes a lady driving in there with her daughter. I would say mom maybe 45, 50, and the daughter, I don't know, in her early 20s probably. And she said, have you by any chance seen a black dog? I said, yes, I did. Oh, great. Where did she go? I said, that away. And she said, oh, okay. I said, up toward that blue house up there. And she said, okay, well, thank you very much. I said, whoa, time out. Hold on. This is a church. Don't you think we ought to ask God where that dog is? Oh, I guess we could. And daughter says, I didn't know you can pray about stuff like that. I said, God, thank you so much that you care about the things that are important to us. Would you please show, what's the dog's name? Jet. Okay, jet black and going like a jet when it left me. I said, would you please show these ladies where Jet is? She said, we're dog sitting that dog. And she's wild. I have no idea how we're going to get her back. Well, when she left, I prayed my favorite prayer. God, put yourself on display, doing what only you can do. Bring all glory to yourself. Let me know how you want me involved, if you want me involved, and how. So they disappeared. They were not gone 10 minutes. And here comes this Chevy Blazer back in the driveway, and I looked in the back seat, no dog. And she's got this huge smile on her face. She comes over, she said, "You told us to go up there to that blue house." I said, "Yeah." She said, "We had to go all the way out and come back." I said, "Yeah, I know, because there's no road to get up over that part." And she said, "Well, we got up there, and there in front of that blue house was a lady standing holding Jet by the collar and just petting her." And I said, "Well, cool, that's awesome. Yeah, we just had to come back and thank you." Thought of the lepers. And so I said, "Well, that's wonderful." She said, "All right, well, we'll see." I said, no, hold on a minute. We asked God to show you where the dog was, right? Yeah. When you got to the dog, you were able to catch her, right? Yeah. So don't you think it'd be appropriate to thank God for helping you to find the dog and to catch her? "Oh, yeah, I never thought about that." I said, "You need to." Walked over, laid my hand on her arm, which was up on the window of the vehicle, and just thanked God for hearing and answering our prayers. Simple prayers like that. This would go back about probably almost 20 years ago. But again, I'm just trying to pick things that everyone here in this room can relate to. It's just elementary stuff, like I say, that even I was able to participate in. There was a letter that came in there from a gentleman up in, the letter came from a correctional facility up mid-state, that's all I'm going to say. And in this envelope, there was a request that we might consider giving him a job. He had been born and raised on a dairy farm. It was pretty much all he knew was dairy farming. And he had made a mistake, got caught, paid the dues, and now he was coming out in a few weeks. So shortening that story a whole lot, my dad and I went up there and got him. And again, just an incredible, incredible story of how he had been mistreated by people who should have known much, much better. But the point here for us is, as we're coming down 322, at Lewistown, we went in to the Kmart, and I said, okay, so he was dressed horribly because they just gave him prison rags to come out. So I went in there and I said, okay, my dad and I are going to buy this gentleman 2 sets of clothes. So please stand over there at the closet, and as he's going in there, he is not coming out with that stuff in his hand. He's going to be wearing it. She's writing down there. And he came out with this huge smile. Man, he's all decked out like he hadn't been in, I don't know, a lot of years. And so we go out and get in the vehicle and start down the road. And I said, "Lester, I got a question for you. How in the world did you find us?" "Well, that's an interesting story. Did you ever hear of the Lancaster farming? Anybody here ever hear of the Lancaster farming?" When I told the publisher of Lancaster Farming this story, and I'm telling you, all of this is the truth. We were sitting in a restaurant. I'm telling him this story. The tears were dripping on his plate, because he just didn't know God works like this. I said, "Lester, how'd you get a hold of us?" He said, "Well, in the prison library, there was a Lancaster Farming." So we started rooting through the Lancaster Farming, and I thought, you know what? This section of advertisers right here, and he started naming names, some of which would hit some of us in this room. And I knew that those people were church-going people, and I just thought maybe somebody could find it in their heart to give me a job. I said, "Wow, how many letters do you write?" He said, "I wrote 89, and then I wrote 1 to the Secretary of Agriculture." I said, "Man, that is," and I'm saying this was not something where he hit print and got 89 copies. See, this guy hand wrote. He said he hand wrote 89 letters. I said, "Wow, that was aggressive. I really applaud you for being that courageous and that persistent. How many did you get back? How did you choose us out of the ones you got back?" One letter. We brought him down, hooked him up with a dairy farmer from Maryland who loved on him. Holy Spirit drew him to Christ. He was water baptized, and I expect to see Lester when I get to heaven. Because one person, and again, it was my dad, it wasn't even me, and my dad's probably with him now. But anyway, just the little things. One of Don Riker's favorite admonitions to us is from John 5. Jesus speaking says, my Father is always working, and I am working. So my question to the Lord repeatedly is, what are you doing here? Do you want me involved? And if so, how? One of the roughest, meanest pieces of humanity that I have ever been around was a gentleman that was a longtime customer of our dealership. And Nelson, you're going to know who this is. I won't use his name because of where I understand this this material may be used. But he was just vile and cursing and swearing, and you could always smell him before you could see him because he smoked unfiltered cigarettes, one off the other. And I walked into the shop one evening, I looked around, I said, "Where's so-and-so?" And they said, oh, yeah, there he is. And I walked over and he said, "You and I need to talk." Okay, what'd we do this time? Because once before, I'd sold him a corn planter, and he grabbed me by the back of the neck and said, "If this," you wouldn't have known it was a corn planter the way he described it, "if this thing doesn't work, you and I are going to make a flying trip to the factory, and we won't need no bleepity bleep airplane." That's the way the guy was wired. But in this particular case, it was a I believe January evening, and it was getting toward closing time. And he said, "I need to talk to you." I said, "Okay, what do you do?" He said, No, it ain't like that." He said, "Let's go outside." And now I thought, I'm really going to get a whooping. So we went out, and he said, "What is going on around here?" I said, "What do you mean? What did we do?" "No," he said, "it isn't quite like that." And I said, "Well," and I always love to draw them out. When they start talking about something they're seeing that just might start to smell and look a little bit like Jesus, what are you seeing? "Well, I go to this dealership and I get treated this way, and I go to this company and I get treated like that, and I come in here and, well, I don't know where you get the bleepity bleeps, but there's something different about your people." So he had no context within which to put it. There was something different about your people. And so after I had drawn him out a little more describing, I said, "Well, the only thing I can tell you is I believe what you're seeing is the love of Christ in action." And he pulled that cigarette out of his mouth and flicked it out like that and said, "That's what I thought." Walked away. Conversation over. Probably a year later, he called one day and said, "Do you know about Connie?" And I said, "What do you mean?" I knew she'd been having some issues. They thought maybe early dementia. They thought maybe a brain tumor, something. Sure enough, she had a brain tumor. So he said, "They're going to operate on her tomorrow." Okay. So my parts manager and I jumped in the pickup, went down there to the Reading Hospital that evening. And I asked her, first of all, I said, "You might outlive me. I don't know if I'll be able to walk back out that door. But the point is, we're all going to die sometime. You may outlive me. Who knows? But when we die, it's important that we know." And she stopped me. She said, "Oh, Don," she said, "I dealt with that when I was 14 years old and what have you." And again, without judging her lifestyle or anything else, I just took a half step back. We prayed for her that evening. And he was sitting there, this rugged piece of humanity, was sitting there. And when we were praying, I said, "So what about you?" And he said, "I don't know about all that religion, bleep, bleep." And I said, "No, I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about a relationship with Jesus Christ," which is what Connie just described. No, not now. I said, "Okay." They operated on her the next day, removed the tumor in its entirety, no cancer. And as far as I know, she's still doing fine today. I haven't talked to her recently, but she's doing well as far as I know. Later that summer, "Hey, Don, did you hear about her husband?" And I said, "I knew he's not doing well physically." She said, "Yeah, he's really not doing well physically. They've given him a few months to live." I said, "Okay, I don't have that promise." And she said, "Well, you know what I mean." I said, "I do, but at the same time, we need to be thinking like that." She said, "Well, I do think you ought to have that conversation you tried to have with him before." So I did. I tried. And he said, "Nah, I don't know. I've done so much stuff I can't be forgiven for." So that, of course, precipitated a conversation. I felt like there was some mellowing, some softening there, and the Holy Spirit was beginning to draw him. So it went another, again, I'm not sure, weeks, maybe months. And then one day, about 9 o'clock in the morning or so, I got a phone call from her. And she said, "Don, we almost had a mess here last night." She said he's at home on a hospital bed, his deathbed, and they're giving him all kinds of morphine, painkillers and whatever, and it's just not keeping up. And this morning, around 3 o'clock, he somehow slipped out of that hospital bed and crawled across to get a gun out of the gun case. Thankfully, the boys were smart enough. They had taken the ammunition and put it away, and he didn't get the deed done, but they realized where he was at. And he just in agony said, "If I can't have a gun, you tell Don Hoover I need to see him." So I went down that morning. Well, I asked her first, I said, well, is he going to understand? She said, he asked for you. I said, all right, because I was going to suggest that, well, I did suggest, I said, can you put me on speakerphone? She said, no, Don, he needs you here. So packed everything up, jumped in my pickup, went down there, walked in. He's laying there just in a deplorable state physically. I missed a part. I missed an incredibly important part. The third attempt, I went down there on Sunday afternoon, and sitting in his house, he said, all right, now I'm ready to talk. And we did. And when I stuck my hand out to him that afternoon, he too, weeping, prayed to receive Christ. So now this is 2 months later, probably. And I'm down there that day, and I didn't have faith to anoint the guy. I just, what am I going to do? And there was a fairly strong sense of Catholicism in the area there, and I didn't want to have the live like the devil all your life, and somebody comes down and splashes a little oil on you, you go to be with Jesus. And it entered my mind to have communion with him. So I touched his hand, and he struggled and pulled, and I said to the hospice nurse, I said, what's the deal? Is he trying to sit up? She said, well, he can drive, but he hasn't sat up for days. He nodded, and I put my other hand in, and the guy struggled to where he got into a seating position. Now, our knees are intermingled. I mean, he's sitting right tight up against me, and again, just not a pleasant aroma. I'm sitting there holding his hands, and I said his name, and I said, so, because this is how we talk to each other, if I was dumb enough to come to your funeral, and they were dumb enough to ask me to speak there, what would you want me to say? And he's looking down, he says, just tell them to do the best that they can do with their hands. I said, anything else? He said, why did you wait so long to tell me about Jesus? I said, now you stop it. We've tried to, and he snickered a little bit. He said, yeah, I guess you did. He said, I still have a difficult time believing that God can actually forgive me. And I said, you need to believe it. And I went back through it again, and he's sitting there nodding. And finally I said, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had communion? And he's just looking down. He still hadn't looked at me. He's still looking down, and he said nothing. And I asked him again, communion, you know, where they have the bread and the, oh, yeah. His eyes got real big, and he sat up, and there was just like this refreshing that came into him when I talked about communion. So I looked at the hospice nurse. She said, I don't know. I'll do what I can. So she disappeared. She comes back later. She says, there's only one liquid in the house that's not alcoholic, and that's orange juice. And I said, perfect. She brought back this orange juice with a straw in it and the most stale saltine cracker I've ever had. And I broke that cracker in half, and when I did, the one half broke in half, so I laid the one piece over on my knee. I was sitting down. There was a black Labrador retriever laying there, and he, being an opportunistic, he stood up, came over, and schlutzed that off the Schlutz. That's a Lancaster cow. Sam, schlutzed, right? Yeah, okay, good. So he looks over at the dog, and he says, yeah, you give communion to Booger. He's a good dog. As far as we know, that was the last time the man ingested anything. And I'm sitting there just looking at him. He's looking at me. And he said, Don Hoover, I love you. And I am really glad I didn't think about it at the time. And this is not an indictment of my father, but it is an acknowledgement of some cultural dynamics. I had never heard my dad say, I love you. A few days later, he died. Guess what? Hey, Don, how would you like to speak at the funeral? I said, I told you, I'm not a priest, I'm not a prophet, I'm not a pastor, and I don't like speaking at funerals. Well, is he connected with you? A few weeks later, I got a phone call from a gentleman who is, really weeping on the phone. And he said, Don, this is so-and-so. He said, is it true that you prayed with him to receive Christ before he died? I said, yeah. He said, what did you do? I said, nothing. And we talked a little bit about Paul plants and Apollos waters and all that. He said, Don, I have been praying for that man for 29 years to come to Christ. So we get to participate in what God is doing. This thing right here is something, again, so pathetically practical, but guys, when we were going through the valley of the shadow in the day, this was a lifesaver for me, this format to help me to organize my thoughts. So here's what I've seen and heard. This is what the Word of God says about it. Here's what I'm going to choose to believe, and then stand on that. And then what are you going to do about it? Okay? And last but not least, right alongside of God is always leading us in triumph, is this. I had a dream where there were 7 train cars that were rolling, and all of them have significance. I'm not going to take time because I'm already on borrowed time up here. But in the dream, there was a man riding a kid's tricycle. And as I got closer to it, that man was me. And my very, very first inclination was, God, thank you so much for giving me the strength to... Now, wait a minute. There's no way. That's thousands of tons. So I stopped and backed up again, saw that the chain wasn't even taut. And looking to the back, I saw that hand back there. And as if to say, I don't even need my whole hand to move your life. The fingers curled up into the palm, and with one pointed finger, he is slowly moving my life along. And the impression that came was, without him, I can do nothing.